The Charity Hospital in 2019. This is a real document. Here is what it says. Basement. The following words are from a maintenance log filed at a Louisiana level B2. Again, the same sound in the east wall. Soft, rhythmic tubes, no HVAC. Report it to the supervisor. The supervisor says, "Do not file a work order." This is the 14th time I have written this. That maintenance worker's name is Gerald Mouton. He's been working at that hospital for 22 years. He's filed that same report, in other words, 14 times. Each time his supervisor tells him, "Don't file a work order, simply log it and proceed." I phoned Gerald last spring. We talked for 2 hours. That's what he said to me. "Hey, welcome back to Red State Horror. So let me ask you something real quick. How much do you trust a building? I don't mean, do you trust the structure, the engineering, the concrete, and the load-bearing walls? I mean the building itself, the institution, the place that is supposed to be, by its very purpose, one of the safest locations a human being can be in. A hospital, a courthouse, a facility built by the state, maintained by a department, staffed by professionals, and inspected by regulators. You walk into a place like that, and some part of you relaxes, whether you realize it or not. The systems are in place. People are watching. Nothing can go very wrong in a place like this. Tonight, I have 3 stories that are going to make you reconsider that instinct. Not because these places are dangerous. All 3 of them are still operational, still serving their communities, still full of people going about their days. The people who work in them are good at their jobs. The buildings function exactly the way they're supposed to. It's just that all 3 of them have something they've decided to live with. Something that doesn't fit in a maintenance report, a work order, or a liability form. Something that, after a certain number of years, the institution quietly decided was more practical to accept than to explain. Have you ever worked somewhere long enough that the weird stuff just becomes normal? That's what these places did, on a very large scale. Headphones in. Let's get into it. Story 1. The Basement at Charity. New Orleans, Louisiana, documented 1983 to present. Tulane Medical Center in New Orleans sits on the same block where Charity Hospital stood for over 200 years. Charity. The old Charity, the one that closed after Katrina and never fully reopened, was one of the oldest continuously operating hospitals in the United States. It treated everyone who came through its doors, regardless of ability to pay. It was, for a huge portion of Louisiana's uninsured population, the only option they had. The building that replaced it in the medical corridor is newer, cleaner, and better lit, but it shares infrastructure with the old Charity footprint. The basement levels, the boiler systems, the utility corridors, the maintenance infrastructure were built on and around what was there before. Gerald Mouton has worked in maintenance at the medical center for 22 years. He is 58 years old, raised in the 9th Ward, the kind of man who describes himself as not easily spooked and means it. He has worked the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift for most of his career, because the differential pay is better and because, he told me, he genuinely likes the building when it's quiet. He liked it, at least, until about his 3rd year. That's when he first heard it. Basement level B2 is a utility corridor. Pipes, electrical runs, the kind of space that exists in every large building and that nobody thinks about unless something stops working. Gerald's rotation takes him through B2 twice a night. He knows every sound that the corridor makes. The pipe ticks from the steam system on cold nights. The low hum of the transformer at the east end. The specific squeak of the 3rd access panel from the left when the pressure changes. One night in his 3rd year, he was walking B2 around 2 a.m. when he heard something he didn't recognize. Low, rhythmic, coming from inside the east wall. Not the pipe tick. He knew that sound. Not the transformer hum. Different frequency, different location. This was slower, more deliberate, almost like something breathing, except he would not use that word with me for the first 40 minutes of our conversation. He worked up to it. I told myself it was pipes, he said. New pipes are doing something I hadn't heard before. I finished my rotation, I went upstairs, and I told my supervisor. He said, "Yeah, we get that sometimes. Don't file a work order, just make a note." I made a note. End of story, I thought. Except it wasn't the end. Same thing, 2 weeks later. Same wall. Same time of night, give or take 30 minutes. Same low, rhythmic sound. Gerald made another note. His supervisor said the same thing. Don't file a work order. Just log it. Gerald has been logging it for 19 years. I asked him to read me some of the entries. He had them in a personal notebook he keeps at home. Not the official facility log, but his own record. Because at some point he decided he wanted documentation that he couldn't be told to quietly misplace. He read me 6 entries. I'm going to share 4 of them. March 2004. B2 East Wall. 2:17 a.m. The sound again. Reported to Supervisor Willis. Same response. Log it. November 2008. B2. 1:50 a.m. The sound lasted approximately 20 minutes. Longer than before. Walked the corridor twice. Could not identify source. The wall felt warm to the touch at the midpoint. Reported. Same response. February 2014. B2. 3:04 a.m. Sound present. A new employee, Marcus T., was with me on rotation. He heard it too. He asked me what it was. I told him I didn't know. That's the first time I said that out loud. June 2019. B2. 2:30 a.m. Sound present. This is the 14th time I have written this. I asked him, has anyone ever actually investigated the wall? Once, he said. Maybe 2010. They brought in a contractor to do a full utility inspection of B2 because there was a grant for infrastructure assessment. The contractor spent 2 days down there. His report said the wall was structurally sound, had no moisture intrusion, and had no evidence of anything unusual. He paused. I asked the contractor directly if he had heard anything while he was down there. He said no. I asked him what hours he worked. He said 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Another pause. B2 during the day is just a corridor. It's only at night, and only around 2 a.m. The contractor was never there when it happened. I asked Gerald, after 19 years, what does he think it is? He was quiet for a long moment, long enough that I didn't fill the silence. I stopped trying to figure out what it is, he said finally. At some point, you're in a building long enough that you just accept the things that don't have answers. You learn to work around them. I don't go to B2 alone after 2 a.m. anymore. That's my rule. Not because I'm afraid exactly. Just because some things deserve to be left to themselves. He paused one more time. The wall has been there a lot longer than I have, he said. Whatever's in it has too. Real quick, before the second story, if this is finding you the way I think it is, the subscribe button is right below this video. Hit the bell too, because I post every Thursday, and YouTube buries it if you don't. The second story tonight is from a facility that closed in 1987 and left something behind in the records. Something nobody's fully dealt with yet. Stay with me. Story 2, What They Left in the Records. Milledgeville, Georgia, Central State Hospital. Files Access 2018. Central State Hospital in Milledgeville, Georgia, was, at its peak in the 1960s, the largest mental institution in the world. Not the largest in the South. In the world. It housed over 12,000 patients at its height, on a campus of 200 buildings, spread across 2,000 acres. For most of its history, it was also one of the most catastrophically understaffed, underfunded, and poorly regulated facilities in the country. The history of what happened to patients there is documented, written about, and genuinely harrowing in ways that have nothing to do with the supernatural. I want to be clear about that up front, because what I'm going to tell you tonight is not about the documented human suffering at Central State. That history deserves its own careful telling. What I'm telling you tonight is narrower. A specific section of the patient records that a researcher, Dr. Annette Briggs, accessed in 2018, and what she found in them that she has not been able to explain. Dr. Briggs is a medical historian at Georgia College. She spent 3 years working through Central State's surviving patient records as part of a project documenting the lives of patients who had no family and no advocate, and whose stories had effectively been buried when the facility began closing its wards in the late 1980s. The records she was working with covered the period from 1951 to 1987, thousands of files. The work was painstaking and often devastating. About 8 months in, she started noticing something. A cluster of patient files, 41 of them, spanning roughly 1961 to 1979, had something in common that wasn't related to diagnosis, treatment, ward assignment, or any other standard administrative category. Every one of the 41 files contained a notation in the physician's remarks section that used a specific phrase. The phrase was, "complains of a visitor." Not a visitor in the normal sense. Central State patients in that era had extremely limited visitation rights. Many had none at all. The phrase wasn't referring to family members or social workers. It was referring to something the patients were reporting coming into their rooms at night. Dr. Briggs pulled all 41 files and read the physician's remarks in detail. The descriptions varied. Different words, different levels of coherence, different patients with different conditions across 18 years. But the core of what they were reporting was consistent enough that she started keeping a separate notebook. "A presence at the foot of the bed," she told me. That phrase, or something very close to it, appears in 37 of the 41 files. The patients described it differently. Some were frightened, some weren't. Some said it spoke to them, some said it just stood there. But the location was the same. The foot of the bed. The time was always described as night. usually late. And in almost every case, the physician's response was the same. Patient experiencing nocturnal delusions consistent with diagnosis. I asked her, is that a standard clinical response to that kind of report? For an individual patient, yes, absolutely, she said. But 41 patients across 18 years, in different wards, with different diagnoses, and different physicians, reporting the same specific detail, presence at the foot of the bed at night, that's a pattern that should have generated some kind of clinical inquiry. It didn't. Every single file has the same two-word response: nocturnal delusions. She submitted a paper on the pattern to 2 peer-reviewed journals. Both rejected it, citing insufficient evidence for any conclusion beyond documentation of a reporting anomaly. She published it in a smaller Georgia historical journal in 2021. It got almost no circulation. I'm a medical historian, not a paranormal researcher, she was very precise about telling me. I am not claiming these patients were experiencing anything other than what their diagnoses might suggest. What I am saying is that 41 patients reporting the same specific thing across 18 years is a historical finding that deserved more than a 2-word dismissal in every case, and that the complete absence of any clinical follow-up for 18 years tells me that somewhere along the line someone decided that the reports were not worth pursuing. She paused. I think about those 41 people, she said quietly. Whatever they were experiencing, real, imagined, or something else entirely, they reported it. They tried to tell someone, and every single time, they got the same 2 words. Nocturnal delusions. Filed. Moved on. The ward where most of the 41 patients were housed is one of the buildings still standing on the Central State campus. The campus itself is partially active. Some buildings have been converted, others are in various stages of renovation or demolition. I asked Dr. Briggs if she'd been inside that particular building. Once, she said. During the research. I went in during the day with a facilities escort. She stopped. I don't think I'd go back at night. I asked her why. She took a moment. I just don't think I would, she said. That's as far as I'll go with that. Story 3. The Agreement in the East Wing, Natchez, Mississippi, Adams County Courthouse. Informal arrangement since 1994. The Adams County Courthouse in Natchez, Mississippi, has been standing since 1819. It's one of the oldest continuously operating courthouses in the American South. 2 centuries of trials, deeds, marriages, probate records, and the whole complicated weight of a county's legal history piled up in its rooms and corridors and archives. Natchez itself is a city that takes its history seriously. It has to. The plantation history, the antebellum architecture, the Mississippi River commerce, the Civil War record. All of it is present in the city's daily life in a way that's harder to ignore than in places that can put history behind glass and call it a museum. The courthouse night cleaning crew has had an informal rule about the East Wing since 1994. Don't clean it alone after 11 p.m. I found out about this the way I find out about most things, from someone on the periphery who mentioned it offhand, not realizing I'd treat it as a lead. A former county clerk named Dorinda Mayfield, who worked in the courthouse for 16 years, told me about the rule in the context of talking about something else entirely. I asked her to back up. It's just the rule, she said, with the straightforward tone of someone describing a parking policy. You don't clean the East Wing alone after 11. 2 people minimum. It's been that way since before I started. I never thought much about it. I asked her why. Well, she said, because of the thing in the East Wing. And then she looked at me like I should have already known that. The East Wing of the Adams County Courthouse houses the historical records going back to the courthouse's founding in 1819. Deeds, wills, court transcripts, registers of births and deaths. It's the kind of archive that a county accumulates over 200 years, filed in floor-to-ceiling cabinets that run the length of 2 connected rooms. The cleaning crew supervisor when the rule was established was a woman named Ruth Ann Tate. Ruth Ann retired in 2009 and passed away in 2016. But her daughter, a woman named Carla, grew up hearing about the courthouse from her mother, and Carla still lives in Natchez, and Carla agreed to talk to me. Mama never made a big thing of it, Carla told me. She was a practical woman. She'd say, the East Wing has something in it, so you send 2 people, and you don't linger, and you get the job done, and you leave. She wasn't scared of it. She just respected it. I asked, did she ever describe what the something was? She said it was a presence. That's the word she always used. A presence that she could feel when she was in there alone, but couldn't feel when she wasn't. She said it wasn't malicious. It was just there, attending to something, like it had its own business in those records, and it didn't particularly appreciate being interrupted. Carla smiled a little when she said that. She said she figured whatever it was had been in those files for a long time and wasn't going anywhere. So she made her peace with it, sent 2 people in, got the work done, left it alone. 30 years, no problems. I asked Carla, does the rule still hold? As far as I know, I was talking to someone who works there last year, and I mentioned it. She knew exactly what I was talking about. He said, yeah, that's still the rule. 2 people in the East Wing after 11. I tried to reach the current facilities manager at the courthouse to ask about it directly. I left 2 messages. Neither was returned. Which honestly tells me something too. There's an old deed from 1823 in the Adams County Courthouse records. I found it in a digitized archive. It's a land transfer, routine for the period, but at the bottom there's a handwritten notation that wasn't typed or printed, just added in ink by whoever was processing the document. It says, let the record show what it knows. I don't know what it means in context. Maybe it's a standard legal phrase I'm not familiar with. Maybe it's something the clerk just felt like writing. But I've thought about it a lot, sitting with these 3 stories. The wall in the Louisiana hospital basement has been making that sound since before Gerald started working there. The 41 patients in Georgia who tried to tell someone and got the same 2 words every time. The presence in the Mississippi courthouse that Ruth Ann Tate made her peace with and worked around for 30 years. Let the record show what it knows. These buildings have been keeping records. In their walls, in their files, in the rules that get passed quietly from one worker to the next. They know things that don't fit in a work order, a clinical note, or a facilities policy. Things that the institutions decided, at some point, were easier to live with than to explain. I think that's right. I think that's probably the only practical choice. But I also think about the people who had to make that choice. The maintenance worker filed the same report 14 times and was told every time, don't write a work order. The physician who wrote nocturnal delusions 41 times without once asking whether 41 was a number worth examining. The cleaning supervisor who sent 2 people into the East Wing every night for 30 years because she respected what was in there. They all knew something. They all decided not to make it a problem. I'm not sure that's wrong, but I'm not sure it's right either. The buildings are still there. The records are still there. Something in the walls. Still there. If you work in a building with a rule like these, a place you don't go alone, a time you don't stay, or something that got accepted without being explained, I want to hear from you. Drop it in the comments. I read everything. This is Red State Horror. I'll see you next Thursday.